Pandora Beyond. The mechanized genome and what it would take to open the box. Again, a documentary narration by Richard C.J. Young, C.Jong. In the first film, I opened a box and showed you what climbed out. In this film, I am going to tell you whether the box can be opened a second time, and if it is, how it must be built so that what climbs out this time is not a surveillance apparatus wearing the skin of a recommendation engine. I set a standard in the first film. 4 tests. Describe the song. Settle the value. Protect the creator. Keep the standard. I ended by saying the lid should stay bolted open as a standard, where everyone could see it and no one could own it. That was a warning. This film is the blueprint for what would have to be true for the warning to become a working instrument. Because in the months since I spoke those words, the flood I described has stopped being a crisis of quality and has become a crisis of solvency. The industry is no longer drowning in bad music. It is drowning in fraudulent music, engineered to steal from a finite royalty pool that was already too small for the humans it was built to serve. Let me put the new numbers on the table, because they have changed, and they have gotten worse. As of the close of 2025, streaming platforms hosted 253 million tracks. The daily intake across global rails sits between 106,000 and 112,000 new uploads a day, and surges toward 170,000 when you count every regional indie aggregator. Deezer, the only major platform that discloses its AI volume, reported in April 2026 that it receives roughly 75,000 fully AI-generated tracks every single day. That is 44% of all new uploads. Of those AI tracks, 85% of the streams they attract are flagged as fraudulent. Streaming farms, bot networks, automated play harvesting designed to drain the royalty pool. Strip the fraud, and genuine AI listening is under half of 1% of all streams. The machines are not being heard. They are being used to steal. And the long tail of the human catalog is now so thin that 60 to 70% of all tracks on streaming platforms receive fewer than 100 streams in an entire year. Over 20% receive exactly 0. The top 1% of artists and tracks account for roughly 75 to 80% of all global streams. The remaining 99% fight over a sliver. This is not a market. This is a winner-take-all lottery with 250 million losing tickets, and the losing tickets now cost money to store. In the first film, I called this a thermodynamic problem. I want to sharpen that now. The thermal resistance I described, the 5 to 7 intermediaries, the fractions of a cent, the 2 to 6 month settlement delay, is no longer just friction. It is a load-bearing failure. The creative cycle runs at the speed of electricity. The financial cycle still runs at the speed of paper, 2 to 6 months to settle a royalty, and the people who built that paper pipeline did not design it to carry fractions of a cent across 250 million files. The pipe is too slow, and it is now also too full. The flood and the friction are the same disease, and the disease is the missing description. The system has no structural knowledge of what it is moving, so it moves everything, slowly, and pays almost everyone nothing. So the question is no longer whether the genome should be mechanized. The question is whether it can be, at the scale of 170,000 uploads a day, at a cost a nonprofit could bear, without becoming a weapon. The first film offered that as an option. This film answers it with receipts. Here is what automated music analysis can actually do in 2026. Tempo and rhythmic downbeat tracking achieve over 95% accuracy on standard datasets. Key and mode detection, major or minor, scores 85 to 90%. Instrumentation density, dynamic range, distortion levels, these are reliably measurable through spectral analysis and waveform features. The objective skeleton of a song, its bones, can now be extracted by a machine in seconds. The subjective tissue is harder. Rhythmic syncopation style, groove nuance, vocal harmony arrangement, the things that separate a good song from a competent one. These operate at an estimated 65 to 75% classification accuracy. And the deepest layer, lyrical sophistication, narrative emotional arc, subcultural authenticity, vocal vulnerability, resists clean extraction from the waveform alone. because those traits live in context the audio does not contain. A machine can hear the sound. It cannot read the soul. Not yet. The honest number is this. Of the original 450 genes, roughly 60 to 70%, 270 to 315 genes, can now be reliably extracted or proxied by deep learning. The remaining 30 to 40% still need a human ear, or a human context, or a human attestation. That is not a failure of the mechanization. That is the boundary of it. And naming that boundary is the first act of discipline that separates a real instrument from a marketing claim. The mechanized genome is not a replacement for the human genome. It is a machine that does the bulk of the structural work and leaves the irreducibly human layers to the people who can actually hear them. Now the cost, because cost is what determines whether this stays a commons or becomes a platform of privilege. Running a full suite of current music information retrieval analysis, source separation, structural segmentation, neural feature extraction, on a single 3-minute track takes roughly 5 to 8 GPU seconds on an enterprise-grade accelerator. At average cloud rates, that is 0.2 to half a cent per track. At the scale of 170,000 uploads a day, that is $340 to $850 a day, $124,000 to $310,000 a year. That is the entire compute cost of structurally analyzing every single track uploaded to the global music industry every day for a year. A nonprofit consortium, funded by micro-donations, grants, or fractional developer fees, can carry that load. The mechanized genome is no longer an infrastructure privilege exclusive to a trillion-dollar platform. It is a line item a standards body can afford. That fact alone changes what is possible. But the genome, mechanized, is still just an engine. An engine is not a standard. And the history of open music technology is a graveyard of engines that never became standards because no one built the adoption incentive. So before I describe the architecture, I want to name the one thing that must be true for any of this to leave the page and enter the world. The genome must become a protocol, not a platform. There is right now no universally adopted, open, machine-readable standard for the structural description of music. There is D.X, the XML standard that labels and DSPs use to deliver files. There is Music Brains, the open encyclopedia of music metadata. There is AcoustID, the open acoustic fingerprint. There are the codes, ISRC for recordings, ISWC for compositions. All of these describe identity. None of them describe the song. The structural features, the genes, the 450-dimensional description of what the music actually is, live locked inside the proprietary databases of Spotify, of Apple, of the old Echo Nest. There is no open ledger of what a song is. The genome, as a public versioned standard, like HTML, like Unicode, like HTTP, does not exist. That is the empty chair this film is pointing at. And I know what you are thinking because I have thought it too. Open music standards have failed before. The Open Music Initiative, launched out of Berkeley and MIT, proposed an interoperable framework for tracking creators and rights. And it struggled because it had no native enforcement mechanism and no monetization engine, and the majors saw no reason to open the moat that protected them. So why would this be different? Because the conditions that produce open protocol adoption have arrived, and they are the same conditions that produced every open standard that won. HTML did not displace the walled gardens of AOL and CompuServe because HTML was nicer. It displaced them because the cost of maintaining the walled garden became higher than the cost of adopting the free shared baseline. Unicode did not replace thousands of localized character encodings because it was elegant. It replaced them because globalized software could not function without a universal baseline. Open standards win when the cost of fragmentation exceeds the cost of cooperation. In 2026, the music industry has arrived at that threshold. The platforms are spending millions purging 75 million tracks at a time, fighting an arms race against AI slop that regenerates faster than policy can react. And the slop is now 85% fraud, designed to steal from the royalty pool. The cost of keeping the description proprietary has, for the first time, exceeded the cost of making it open. That is the door. The genome walks through it, or it does not. and the industry keeps managing the heat forever. So let me describe the instrument that would walk through that door. 5 layers. Each one is a test the first film set, made operational. The first layer is the mechanized genome itself, the engine. Every incoming file, human or machine, passes through the automated structural analysis. 270 to 315 genes extracted by machine. The irreducible remainder flagged for human attention. The machine does not decide what is music. It describes what is there. The second layer is the listener-as-annotator. And this is the inversion I want you to hear most carefully, because it is where the original Pandora failed, and where this one must not. The original Genome paid trained musicians 20 to 30 minutes per song. That was its genius and its limit. It was expensive, it was slow, and it did not scale. The mechanized genome distributes that labor, but it must distribute it as structural annotation, not as preference data. Here is the discipline. The listener interaction is never, "Did you like this song?" It is an objective acoustic question. Which of these two has the stronger rhythm shift? Is this track acoustic or electronic? Does this section have a minor key bridge? Binary choices, barely intrusive, layered onto the natural habit of listening. The listener is not being asked to vote on their taste. They are being asked, in 2-second increments, to confirm a structural fact the machine has tentatively measured. Their answer calibrates the correlation between structure and response. It never becomes the response. That distinction is the single load-bearing wall between a commons filter and the engagement optimization machine the first film spent 35 minutes diagnosing. If the listener feedback becomes the primary signal, you have rebuilt Pandora with better marketing. If the structural description stays primary and the feedback stays secondary, you have built something new. The gamified annotation studies, Major-Minor, Tag A Tune, proved a decade ago that crowdsourced users generate clean structural tags when the task is objective. The precedent exists. The discipline is the point. And here is the exchange that makes the opt-in honest. The original Pandora ate your privacy silently, from the moment you typed your zip code. The listener in this system opts in explicitly. You choose to participate in the annotation, and in exchange you receive a clean feed. The filter has eaten the slop before it reaches you. You are not surrendering your data so the platform can describe you. You are trading your 2-second judgments for a feed with the fraud already removed. The description of the music is the commons. The description of you is yours, portable, exportable, deletable. The original owned it invisibly. This one hands it back. That is the 4th test, made personal. The 3rd layer is sovereignty. The creator self-describes their song's genes at upload. They sign that description cryptographically. The structural manifest travels with the file, not locked in a host's proprietary database. The platform that hosts the song is not permitted to rewrite the description. It can layer its own recommendations on top, but the description of what the song is belongs to the person who made it. This is the 3rd test, operationalized. Sovereignty is not a payout percentage. Sovereignty is the right to describe your own song and have that description honored. The DDEX media work notation standard already exists to streamline creator declarations. Decentralized metadata protocols already allow an artist to upload an audio file with an immutable cryptographic manifest. The rails are there. What is missing is a platform willing to honor the manifest rather than overwrite it, and the leverage to make them. The leverage is the 4th layer, the settlement engine. Because the song is now structurally described and machine-readable, because the gene map carries the splits, the rights, the contributors, the royalties can route directly. The 2 to 6 month settlement delay, the thermal resistance, is not a feature of a music business. It is evidence of a system that cannot read its own files. The moment the description is open and structured, settlement collapses from months to seconds. Sound Exchange has already optimized direct digital payouts. Web3 rails like Audius and Gala Music already settle micro-royalties on-chain within seconds of a play. The Genome does not invent fast settlement. It removes the one reason fast settlement was ever impossible: the system's inability to read what it is paying for. The 2nd test becomes a feature of the architecture, not a hope. The 5th layer is the quarantine, and it is the layer that answers the question every platform is currently fumbling. What do you do with the slop? The platforms purge. Spotify removed 75 million tracks in a single sweep. That is blunt force, and it is a censorship problem dressed as a quality problem, because someone has to decide what counts as spam, and that someone is a private company with private incentives. The genome does not delete. It quarantines. A track that fails the structural filter does not enter the paid royalty pool. It does not touch the finite lake. It is not removed from existence. It lives in a raw tier, available to anyone who wants to hear it, but not drawing a share of money meant for structurally genuine music. The creator can appeal by improving the structure. The filter never decides what is music. It decides what enters the paid commons. That is the difference between a filter and a throne, and it is the difference that keeps the fourth test alive. Before the adoption sequence, I want to name the one incentive I have not yet given its full weight, because it is the incentive that decides whether this standard is adopted without a war. The platforms are not the enemy of this instrument. In the current climate, they are its most desperate customer. Consider what the platforms are carrying. 170,000 uploads a day, nearly half of them AI-generated, 85% of the AI streams flagged as fraud. The compute and storage cost of hosting, indexing, and processing an infinite river of digital noise is enormous, and it grows every quarter. The purges, Spotify's 75 million tracks in a single sweep, are not discipline. They are panic. A platform that allows its users to opt into an open filter that cleans the feed before it ever touches the platform's servers is offloading the data nightmare onto a commons that does the work for free. That is not a concession. That is a cost line disappearing. Consider what the platforms are losing. Listeners are tired. Collaborative filtering has made playlists feel sterile, predictable, and repetitive. The same songs surfaced the same way because the crowd did the same thing. The industry calls it streaming fatigue, and it is a retention problem the platforms cannot solve with more of the same algorithm that caused it. The genome layer, injected into the existing interface, the gamified micro-quiz, the binary blind taste test, the structural badge a listener earns for confirming an acoustic fact, turns passive, numbed scrolling into active participation. It raises dwell time. It raises retention. It makes the app fun to use again. The platforms will welcome it for the same reason they welcomed every engagement feature that ever raised their numbers, and that is the honest incentive that opens the door. And consider what the platforms cannot currently offer. The true long tail. Right now, the genuine independent track, the structurally real, human-made song with zero marketing budget, is buried under 250 million files, most of them noise. The opt-in filter does not delete the noise. The listener who wants the raw, unfiltered, chaotic pool can still have it. Nothing is censored, nothing is removed. But the listener who turns on the toggle overlays a high-throughput genomic membrane, and the buried human track floats to the surface because the filter can finally tell it apart from the slop. The platform that could never surface that track with collaborative filtering because the crowd had never clicked on it can now surface it structurally because the genome knew what it was before anyone heard it. So the architecture is a rare thing, a genuine alignment. The artists get real-time self-attestation and sovereignty. The listeners get a fun, gamified discovery that trades their 2-second focus for a clean feed without surrendering their privacy in secret. And the dominant platforms get a free, crowd-validated quality control engine that purges revenue fraud, offloads their data cost, and makes their apps fun again. The standard does not ask the platforms to surrender. It asks them to let their users opt in, and it gives the platforms back more than it takes. That is the incentive that makes adoption possible without a war. And it is the one piece I had underweighted until now. But I want to name the tension inside it, because the first film taught me to. The gamified layer boosts engagement, and engagement is the currency the engagement optimization machine was built to harvest. The discipline that keeps this from becoming that is the same discipline I named for the annotator layer. The interaction is a structural question, not a preference vote. The quizzes teach the listener to hear, not to rank. The moment the platform reshapes the quiz into a preference signal, the moment which has the stronger rhythm shift becomes, which do you like better? The genome is gone, and the throne is back. The incentive that opens the door is the same incentive that, unchecked, swings it the wrong way. The fourth test is not passed once. It is defended every day. Now, the adoption sequence, because none of this matters if no one uses it, and the incumbents will not surrender the moat willingly. The realistic sequence has 4 phases, and every phase is already seated in the 2026 landscape. Phase 1. Open source developers build the genome extraction model and publish it as a standard. This is already half done. The tools exist: Essentia, Librosa, Demux, the audio foundation models. The work is assembly, not invention. Phase 2. Creator-first platforms adopted as a voluntary, verified structural badge. Bandcamp, with its independent-friendly ownership. SoundCloud, with its massive independent creator base. Audius, already decentralized. Resonate, already a co-op. These platforms have the maximum incentive to adopt an open filter because it lets them protect their feeds from AI slop without building a multi-million-dollar proprietary tracking engine. The open filter is cheaper than the closed problem. Phase 3. The clean feed wins listeners. Listeners tired of algorithmic bloat, tired of skipping through slop, opt in. The portable taste profile, the listener's structural description, owned by the listener, working across every platform that implements the standard, erases the lock-in. The first platform to adopt loses nothing, because the profile is portable and gains the one thing every platform wants: a feed people do not want to leave. Phase 4. The majors follow, because the market pulled them, not because they were asked to surrender, but because the cost of staying proprietary, purging millions of tracks, fighting the fraud arms race alone, carrying the server cost of 250 million files, exceeded the cost of adopting the free shared baseline. And there is a catalyst waiting in the wings. The EU AI Act and FTC transparency directives are already moving toward mandatory labeling of synthetic media. When regulation demands that platforms clearly index and disclose fully synthetic audio, an open, standardized structural description becomes the cheapest compliance path. The regulation does not mandate the genome. It mandates the disclosure, and the genome is the instrument that makes the disclosure machine-readable. The standard arrives as the path of least resistance. I want to stop here and name the counterarguments, because a film that does not name the strongest objections against its own thesis is a sales pitch. And I did not build the first film as a sales pitch, and I will not build this one as one. The first objection: the complexity gap. Music is fluid. A fixed taxonomy of 450 genes will misclassify avant-garde work, genre-bending work, non-Western structures. The genome is a Western, pop-rock originated frame, and forcing the world's music through it is a form of taxonomic violence. This is true, and it is the reason the genome must be versioned, extensible, and governed by a body that includes the cultures it describes. The original was built in a darkened room in Oakland by trained musicians working in 5 genres. The standard cannot be built in one room. It must be built by the people whose music it describes, or it is a new colonialism wearing a lab coat. I take this objection as a design constraint, not a refutation. The second objection is the one that keeps me up at night, and I want to give it its full weight: the arms race. If the genome filter is open, the AI generators, Suno, Udio, the next ones, can ingest the model and train their generators to spoof the criteria of structurally genuine music. The slop adapts to look, on paper, exactly like high-quality human art. The filter and the fraud enter a permanent arms race, and the slop learns faster than the standard can update. This is real. It is the one objection I cannot fully answer, because it describes a dynamic, not a static flaw. What I can say is this: the original genome worked because it described the song, not the response. An arms race fought over structural description is a different kind of arms race than the one the platforms are currently fighting over engagement metrics, because structural description is anchored to something the music actually is, not to something the crowd does. The slop can spoof the genes. It cannot yet spoof the irreducibly human layers, the lyrical sophistication, the narrative arc, the vulnerability, because those do not live in the waveform. The filter's second line of defense is the human annotator layer, and the human ear is the one instrument the generator cannot yet fully fool. But I will not pretend this is solved. It is a live front, and it will remain one. The third objection: open music tech has failed before, and the majors will not open their data. This is historically accurate, and it is why the adoption theory I just described does not ask the majors to open anything. It asks the indie layer to adopt a standard the majors are free to ignore, and it lets the market do the convincing. The Open Music Initiative failed because it tried to move the center. The genome succeeds, if it succeeds, by moving the edge and letting the edge pull the center. The fourth objection: capture. An open, commons-owned filter is perpetually vulnerable to being captured by the entities that fund it or run its verification nodes. A few large corporate funders could quietly rewrite the thresholds to favor their catalogs. The commons becomes a soft censorship mechanism. This is the same risk the fourth test was written to name, and the only defense against it is structural. The standard must be governed by a body with no platform majority, funded diversely, with the description verifiable by any independent party. If the governance is captured, the fourth test fails, and everything I have just described becomes the very throne the first film warned against. I am not naive about this. A commons is not immune to capture. It is just harder to capture than a private database, and that is the only claim I will make. So here is where I land, and I want to land carefully because the first film ended with a warning, and this one must end with a choice. The mechanized genome is buildable. The cost is affordable. The tools exist. The adoption path is seeded. The regulation is moving. Every layer I have described maps to a test the first film set, and none of them require a technology that does not yet exist. What they require is governance, discipline, and the willingness to build the description as a commons rather than a product. The original Pandora asked the listener to surrender their privacy so the platform could describe them. Pandora Beyond asks the listener to opt in so the filter can describe the music, and it hands the listener back the description of themselves as the price of the exchange. That inversion is the entire thesis. The box is opened a second time, but this time the lid is visible. The exchange is explicit. The description is owned by the people who made the music and the people who hear it. And the slop is quarantined, not deleted, because the filter never claims the authority to decide what music is, only what enters the paid commons. I set 4 tests in the first film. The mechanized genome, run as a commons, can pass all 4. With one live front, it must defend forever. The arms race against a generator that learns to spoof the structure. That front is the price of openness, and I will not hide it. The alternative is the closed filter, owned by one platform, and the closed filter is the throne the first film refused to build. The genome already proved it can put the right music in front of the right person. The mechanized genome, governed as a commons, could prove it can keep the wrong music off the table, and, for the first time, settle the value at the speed the music was made, because the system can finally read what it is paying for. I opened this box once and I watched what climbed out. I am not vain enough to claim the industry will open it this way. The industry has every incentive to own the filter, to privatize the standard, to turn the cleanup of the flood into the next subscription. I am offering this as an option of what should happen, because I am one of the few people alive who knows it can happen, and because I am the one who built the hinge the first time and watched it swing the wrong way. This time, the lid stays bolted open as a standard, governed as a commons, where everyone can see it and no one can own it. The box is the protocol. The protocol is the gift, and the warning the name Pandora was always carrying, that a system which describes music perfectly will also describe the listener perfectly, is answered, finally, by handing the listener's description back. Same instrument, 2 floods, 1 originator. The box opened a second time, with the lid where it belongs. Richard C.J. Young, Sejong Originator, The Music Genome Project.